I've been married to Sarah for 8 years. We live in a comfortable house in the suburbs of Chicago, and on the outside, everything looked perfect. We had a routine. I worked at a marketing firm, and Sarah had a decent job at a local charity. We'd go to parties, have friends over, and even traveled to Mexico last year for our anniversary. Life was good, or so I thought. But the cracks started to show a few months ago. It was subtle at first. Sarah became distant, often glued to her phone, her laughter too loud when she was with her friends but quieter at home. I brushed it aside, trying to convince myself that she was just busy with work. Things like this happen in relationships, right? Then there were the little lies. She'd say she was working late but came home with a hint of perfume that wasn't hers. I wanted to ignore it, but my gut was screaming. One Thursday evening, I got home earlier than usual. The house was quiet. Sarah was supposed to be at her book club, but as I stepped into our living room, I noticed her purse was still hanging on the chair. "Sarah," I called out, but there was no answer. I walked to the kitchen and found an envelope lying on the table. It was addressed to her. My heart raced as I opened it. Inside were tickets to a concert, an event for tomorrow night. My mind raced. She hadn't mentioned any plans, and I knew she wouldn't go alone. I was about to call her when I heard a car pull up. I quickly ducked behind the couch and watched as Sarah opened the door, laughing, but she wasn't alone. James, my childhood best friend, walked in with her. My heart sank. James and I had been friends since we were kids. We grew up together, shared our first beers, and even had double dates with our high school girlfriends. I felt betrayed not just by Sarah, but by him too. I watched them from the shadows, my fists clenched as they settled on the couch. I was frozen, not wanting to believe what I was seeing. They were laughing, leaning into each other, and before I knew it, I saw her laying her head on his shoulder. That was it. The betrayal hit me like a freight train. I didn't even need solid evidence. The sight of them together was enough. When they finally left, I felt a storm of emotions. Anger surged through me, clouding my judgment. I grabbed my phone and sent a text to James. "You better stay the hell away from my wife." I didn't care what his response was. I was done. I wanted answers, and I wanted them now. I confronted Sarah the next morning. I waited until she had her coffee, pretending nothing was wrong, but I could see the guilt in her eyes. "You went to a concert with James last night, didn't you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Her reaction was defensive. "What? You're being ridiculous. It was just a friendly outing." The lies poured out of her mouth like she was reading from a script. "You know how close we all are. You're overreacting." I couldn't take it anymore. "You're lying," I shouted. "I saw you two together. It's not just friendly." The look on her face was a mix of shock and anger, but what struck me the most was how little she seemed to care. She started to justify her actions, blaming me for being distant, for working too much, for everything except taking responsibility. "You've been so busy with work, I felt alone," she said, tears streaming down her cheeks. But I couldn't feel sorry for her. I was crushed. The emotional impact of that moment was overwhelming. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. This was a woman I had trusted, shared my life with, and now she was throwing it all away for someone I considered family. I went through phases of shock, anger, and deep sadness over the next few days. I'd never felt so betrayed in my life. I needed to decide how to move forward. Would I try to salvage our marriage, or was it time to kick her out? It took a few sleepless nights to gather my thoughts. I realized I wouldn't accept a life built on lies and deceit. The decision became clear. I needed to take control of my life and start fresh. As I sat on the couch, alone and broken, I knew this was just the beginning. I had a journey ahead of me, one filled with heartache and the potential for newfound strength. I didn't know what the future held, but I was determined to rewrite my story. The days that followed were a blur. Sarah tried to play the role of the remorseful wife, showering me with apologies and tears, claiming she was just confused and that it was a mistake. But her words felt hollow to me, like an actor reading lines from a script that didn't resonate with the emotions I knew once existed between us. I didn't want to hear her excuses. I wanted to feel anger, to feel something other than this numb, aching disbelief that had settled in my chest. One night I sat alone in our dimly lit living room, the shadows creeping in from the corners like whispers of betrayal. I reached for my phone and found myself scrolling through social media. As I looked at pictures of friends and family, I felt a deep sense of isolation. Everyone seemed to be doing fine, living their lives, while I was stuck in this painful limbo. I couldn't even bring myself to confide in our mutual friends, fearing that they might choose a side or worse, pity me. But then a thought struck me. If Sarah wanted to play games, then I would play too, but I'd change the rules. Instead of sulking in a pit of despair, I decided to take control of my narrative. I reached out to an old friend, Mike, who I had lost touch with over the years. Mike was a free spirit, always up for a good time, and I thought he could help me regain my footing. Meeting him for drinks felt like a leap into the unknown. I burst into the local bar, and the moment Mike saw me, a wide grin spread across his face. "Look who it is, the married man who disappeared," he exclaimed, clapping me on the back. As we started to catch up over beers, I felt a flicker of the old me re-emerging. We reminisced about our wild college days, and for the first time in weeks I laughed. Mike had always had a way of making life feel lighter. As the night wore on and the drinks flowed, I started sharing what had been going on with Sarah. Each word felt like a release, a way to unburden myself from the weight of the betrayal. "She's cheating on me. With James, man." "I caught them together," I said, my voice low but steady. Mike's expression shifted to one of shock, then anger. "No way, that's messed up, dude. You deserve better." He listened as I poured out my heart, and with each story I could feel the anger bubbling inside me growing stronger. After a few more drinks, I realized I needed to channel that anger somewhere productive. I mentioned to Mike my idea of getting back at Sarah and James, not with violence or anything illegal, but by living my life to the fullest. "I want to show them what they're missing," I said, my voice taking on a newfound confidence. Over the next few weeks, I focused on reinventing myself. I started hitting the gym, something I hadn't done in ages. The physical exertion helped clear my mind, and I found a surprising sense of strength in my body as I pushed through workouts. I signed up for a cooking class, something I'd always wanted to try but never had the time for. It became a therapeutic outlet, a way to express my creativity and meet new people. Every time I came home, the house felt different. Sarah was there, and at times she would try to engage in conversation, desperate for my attention. But I was no longer drawn into her web of guilt and excuses. I was like an observer in my own life, watching as she struggled to maintain her facade. She'd ask about my day, and while I would tell her about the gym, cooking classes, and even new friends I was making, there was a part of me that enjoyed seeing her squirm as she realized I was moving on. One evening, after a particularly invigorating workout, I returned home to find Sarah on the phone, her voice animated and cheerful, a stark contrast to the somber atmosphere that had filled our home previously. I overheard snippets of her conversation, laughter spilling from her lips, and I felt a pang of jealousy rise within me. Who was she laughing with? Was it James? The thought sent a surge of anger through my veins. I decided then that it was time to take things up a notch. I wanted to make my presence felt, to ensure that Sarah understood I was done being the man who sat back and accepted her lies. I would embrace my new friendships and focus on creating a life that didn't include her betrayal. Feeling invigorated by the thought, I reached out to a few guys from my cooking class and invited them over for a dinner party. It was time to bring some life back into my home, and maybe even show Sarah that I was capable of happiness without her. I wanted her to see what she had lost, and I hoped it would sting. When the night of the dinner arrived, my place was filled with laughter and the mouth-watering aroma of the meal I had prepared. Friends gathered around the table, sharing stories and jokes, and I felt a warmth I hadn't experienced in a long time. With every laugh and every clink of glasses, I began to feel a sense of liberation. In that moment, I was reminded that while Sarah had chosen to betray me, I still had the power to choose my own path. I wasn't defined by her actions. I was reclaiming my life and moving forward. I could hear Sarah's footsteps coming down the hall. She had come home early, and as she entered the living room, I looked up to see her expression shift from confusion to shock as she took in the scene before her. "Who are all these people?" she asked, her voice barely masking her annoyance. I smiled, genuinely this time. "Just some friends," I replied, feeling a surge of confidence. "You should join us." Her eyes narrowed, but I could see that she was taken aback. Maybe she wasn't ready for this new version of me. I was determined to show her that I could thrive without her. The atmosphere in the room shifted as Sarah took a step forward, her eyes darting between me and my guests. I could see her trying to process what was happening. I had gone from the sad husband moping around the house to someone who was the center of attention, and it unsettled her. "Is this some sort of party?" she asked, feigning casualness while I could sense the simmering anger beneath her facade. "Just a little get-together. You're welcome to join us," I replied, trying to keep my tone light. I gestured toward the table where everyone was laughing and enjoying the meal I had prepared. "I made your favorite dish." This was my chance to reclaim my space. The moment felt surreal. I was taking back control, and I could see Sarah struggling with the reality of it all. She hesitated, glancing at the gathering and then back at me. I could almost hear the gears turning in her mind as she weighed her options. "Maybe later," she finally said, her voice strained, and turned to walk back down the hall. I watched her go, a mix of satisfaction and disbelief swirling within me. It was the first time I had truly felt powerful in weeks. As the night wore on, my friends and I shared stories, laughter echoing off the walls of what had once felt like a prison. I felt alive in a way I hadn't in a long time, surrounded by people who appreciated me for who I was, not who I had once been with Sarah. I could see in their eyes that they were rooting for me, and it fueled my resolve. The following weeks turned into a series of dinner parties and outings with my cooking friends. I started to explore new activities, from hiking trips to spontaneous road trips. I finally felt like I was living, rather than just existing in the aftermath of betrayal. Sarah tried to act nonchalant, but I could see the cracks in her composure. One evening, after a particularly chaotic week, I returned home to find Sarah sitting on the couch, looking more deflated than ever. She had her phone in hand, and there was a nervous energy about her. As I walked past her, I caught a glimpse of the screen, messages from James. I stopped dead in my tracks. My heart raced as I debated whether to confront her again, but I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of seeing me riled up. Instead, I walked into the kitchen, pretending to be busy while listening to her shuffle behind me. After a few awkward minutes, she finally spoke up. "Are you really going to ignore me?" Her tone was defensive, as if she were trying to provoke me. "Why would I ignore you? It's your house too," I said, forcing a calmness I didn't fully feel. "I just thought you'd want some space after your little outing with James." Her eyes flashed with anger. "I told you it was nothing." "You're being ridiculous." "Ridiculous? I saw you two together, Sarah. You can't keep lying to me." "I'm not lying," she shot back, hurt and frustration mingling in her voice. "You have no idea how hard this has been for me. I was lonely." "Lonely?" I echoed, incredulous. "You chose to cheat. You made that decision. Don't put that on me." She opened her mouth to respond, but I could see she was at a loss for words. Instead of letting her drag me into another circular argument, I turned the conversation. "What do you want, Sarah? Do you want to fix this? Or are you just trying to keep your options open with me and James?" Her silence spoke volumes. I could see the truth settling in, and for a moment the weight of the world hung between us. "I want to fix things. I love you," she finally said, her voice shaky. "Do you? Because love doesn't hurt like this," I replied, leveling my gaze at her. "It doesn't break trust. It doesn't lead to this endless cycle of lies." I saw the tears welling in her eyes, but instead of feeling sympathy, I felt a strange sense of relief. I was finally standing up for myself, and it felt good. I wasn't going to be the victim anymore. In that moment, I realized I needed to make a choice. I could either try to salvage what was left of our marriage or end it once and for all. I needed time to think, so I told Sarah I was going out for a while. I grabbed my jacket and headed to the one place that had become a sanctuary for me, the bar where I had met Mike. As I sat at the bar nursing a drink, I felt the tension begin to ease. I thought about the life I wanted, one free of betrayal, filled with genuine connections, adventure, and laughter. I recalled the warmth of my friends and the thrill of cooking. I realized that no matter what I decided to do about Sarah, I needed to prioritize my own happiness. Mike joined me a short while later, a knowing smile on his face. "How's it going, man?" he asked, leaning in. I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "It's been tough, but I'm starting to see things differently. I'm not going to let her dictate my happiness anymore. Good for you, he said, raising his glass in a toast. You deserve to be happy. As we clinked our drinks together, I felt a sense of camaraderie forming around me. I realized that if I decided to leave Sarah, I wouldn't be alone. I had people who cared about me, who wanted to see me grow. After a long night of talking and laughing with Mike, I returned home, my mind clearer than it had been in weeks. I knew I had to confront Sarah about our future. I needed closure, one way or another. It was time to make a decision that would shape the rest of my life. The following morning, I woke up feeling a mix of determination and anxiety. It was time to confront Sarah about our relationship and set some boundaries. I spent some time in the kitchen, brewing a strong cup of coffee and mentally preparing myself for what I knew would be a difficult conversation. I had thought about it all night, what I wanted to say, how I wanted to frame it. This needed to be a clear and honest discussion without any distractions or deflections. Sarah came into the kitchen, her hair a mess and her eyes still heavy with sleep. She offered me a tentative smile, one that seemed forced. "Good morning," she said, her voice soft, almost hesitant. "Morning," I replied, trying to keep my tone neutral. "We need to talk." Her expression shifted slightly, worry creeping into her features. "About what?" "About us," I said, taking a deep breath. "About what happened with James and where we go from here." I could see her heart rate pick up, her breathing becoming slightly shallow. "I know I messed up and I've been thinking a lot about it," she said, her voice shaky. "I want to fix this, I really do." "Do you?" I challenged, looking her in the eye, "because it doesn't feel that way. You keep saying you love me, yet you went behind my back. What kind of love allows that?" She opened her mouth to respond but seemed to choke on her words. I could see the guilt wash over her face, and for a moment I almost felt sorry for her, almost, but I reminded myself of all the pain she had caused me. "I've been working on myself," she continued, her voice gaining a hint of desperation. "I've started seeing a therapist and I realize how I let my insecurities take control. I was feeling neglected and I made a terrible choice." "Neglected?" I interrupted, my voice rising. "You think cheating is an answer to feeling neglected? You've been lying to me, and that's what hurts the most. You didn't just betray my trust, you betrayed our marriage. You didn't even think about what that would do to us." She flinched at my words and I could see tears brimming in her eyes again. I know," she said, her tone frantic. "I'm so sorry, I can't express enough how much I regret it. I want to rebuild what we had." I shook my head, trying to process everything. "But do you really think it can go back to the way it was? We can't just pretend this didn't happen. Trust isn't something you can just rebuild overnight." "I understand that. Please, give me a chance to prove that I can be better," she pleaded, stepping closer to me. "I love you and I want to fight for us. I'll do anything." The sincerity in her voice wavered and I noticed the desperate plea in her eyes. But I was no longer the man who would take her back just because she was apologizing. I needed to be firm. "Love isn't enough to fix this, Sarah. I need to know that you're committed to change. I can't keep pouring my heart into a relationship when you're still keeping a foot out the door with James." She looked away, shame washing over her features. "I didn't want to hurt you," she whispered, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I know you didn't want to hurt me, but you did. And now I need to think about what I want, too." At that moment, I realized I could no longer live in the shadow of her mistakes. I had spent too long trying to save something that felt irreparably broken. "I'm not saying we can't work on this, but I need space to figure things out. I need to take care of myself first." She stared at me, the realization dawning in her eyes. "You mean you want to separate?" "I think it's the best option for now," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. "I can't pretend everything is fine when it's not. We need to figure out if there's a way forward, but I can't do that while we're living together in this tension." Her reaction was one I had anticipated: shock, confusion, and an underlying sense of fear. "But I thought we could fix this together," she said quietly, her voice breaking. "We can't fix it while I'm still feeling betrayed," I replied. "I need to clear my head and start focusing on my own happiness again." She looked defeated as she sank into a chair at the kitchen table, her hands covering her face. The sight broke my heart, but I reminded myself that this was for both of us. I needed to step away to understand what I truly wanted. "I'll find a place," I said softly, meaning every word. "I just need some time." As I said those words, a weight lifted off my shoulders. I felt both sadness and relief coursing through me. I was finally taking a step toward reclaiming my life. I knew this decision wouldn't be easy, but it was necessary. Over the next few days, Sarah and I lived in the same house but with a newfound distance. We avoided each other as much as possible, and it felt surreal to be in the same space without acknowledging the elephant in the room. I spent more time out of the house, either at the gym or with friends, and I felt a sense of freedom with each passing day. But even in that newfound freedom, I couldn't shake the emotional toll it had taken on me. Each night when I returned home, I was confronted by the remnants of what had once been our life. It was a painful reminder, but it also pushed me to dig deeper into my own healing process. I began journaling, pouring my thoughts onto the page as a form of release. I wrote about the moments leading up to this point, the pain of betrayal and my hopes for the future. I realized that the journey ahead wouldn't be easy, but it was mine to navigate. Each word I penned felt like another step toward healing. I was transforming my pain into strength, and it was empowering. As the days turned into weeks, I started to feel a semblance of clarity. I didn't want to wallow in bitterness or resentment. I wanted to learn from this experience and emerge even stronger than before. I had friends who cared about me, a budding passion for cooking, and a desire to explore what truly made me happy. It was an arduous path, but one I had chosen willingly. I was ready to move forward, whatever that might mean. I might not have all the answers yet, but I knew that I was no longer defined by Sarah's betrayal. I was reclaiming my identity, one day at a time. As the days turned into weeks, I settled into a new routine. I had officially moved out of the house, renting a small but comfortable apartment about 10 minutes away. The change in scenery did wonders for my mindset. No longer did I have to walk through the door and be reminded of Sarah's betrayal. Here, I could breathe differently, and I began to rediscover parts of myself that had lain dormant for far too long. I kept my circle of friends close, and Mike became a regular fixture in my life. We would often meet for drinks, and he was always there with a listening ear and a supportive word. He encouraged me to let go of the past and embrace this new chapter, and I found myself leaning into that guidance. I signed up for more cooking classes and even started experimenting with my own recipes at home. It felt liberating to create in the kitchen without the constraints of a relationship that had become suffocating. One evening after a particularly successful cooking class, I invited a few of my classmates over for dinner. It felt good to socialize and share my passion with others who appreciated it. As we sat around the table, laughing and enjoying the meal, I felt a genuine sense of connection that I hadn't felt in ages. It was refreshing to be around people who were supportive and excited about life. Later that night, as I cleaned up the kitchen, I received a text from Sarah. My heart raced as I read it. "Can we talk? I miss you." I hesitated, staring at the screen. Part of me was torn. I had spent weeks building my life back up, and the last thing I wanted to do was open old wounds. But another part of me felt a deep curiosity about what she might want to say. I took a deep breath and replied, "Sure, but only if we can keep it civil. I'm not ready for emotional games." She responded almost immediately, "I promise. I just want to talk about everything that's happened." We agreed to meet at a coffee shop the next day. As I sat there waiting, I felt a mixture of anxiety and resolve. I had come so far in my healing journey, and I didn't want to regress. But at the same time, I knew that having an open and honest conversation was crucial for both of our sakes. When Sarah walked in, she looked different. The casual style she used to wear was replaced by a more polished look, and there was a hint of vulnerability in her eyes. I could see signs of change, but I was careful not to let my guard down completely. "Thank you for meeting me," she said, taking a seat across from me. I noticed her fidgeting with her hands, a sign of her nerves. "Let's get straight to it," I replied, wanting to cut through the pleasantries. "What do you want to talk about?" "I've been doing a lot of reflecting," she began, her voice steadying. "I know I messed up, and I realize how much I took for granted. I understand now that I was selfish and I hurt you deeply." I watched her closely, searching for any signs of insincerity. "And what do you want from me?" I asked, needing clarity on her intentions. I want to apologize properly. I'm not asking to get back together, but I hope we can find a way to move forward, whether that's as friends or just two people who once cared about each other, she said, her voice quieter now. I felt the weight of her words. It was refreshing to hear her take responsibility for her actions. You're saying you've changed? I pressed, wanting to understand her growth. Yes, she replied, a hint of determination in her eyes. I've been going to therapy and I've been working on myself. I realize now how I let my insecurities drive me to make terrible choices. I don't want to be that person anymore. Actions speak louder than words, Sarah, I said, my voice firm. You hurt me and that's not something I can just forget. I need to see that you're genuinely committed to your own growth before I can consider any form of friendship. I understand, she replied, a flicker of sadness crossing her face. I don't expect you to forgive me right away. I just want you to know that I'm taking this seriously. We talked for a while longer, discussing our shared memories and the things we'd loved about each other. It was bittersweet, filled with nostalgia and reminders of what once was. But there was also a sense of closure that I hadn't realized I needed. By the end of the conversation, I felt lighter, as if a burden had been lifted. When we parted ways, I realized that I could finally let go of the resentment that had been holding me back. I wouldn't forget what had happened, but I also didn't need to carry that weight with me anymore. It was time to focus on my future. Over the next few weeks, my life continued to flourish. I became more involved in my cooking classes, even starting a small group to share recipes and techniques. The camaraderie I found with my classmates filled a void that I hadn't even known existed. I was no longer just a husband, I was becoming me again. But then one evening, something unexpected happened. I received a call from Mike, his voice unusually serious. Hey man, I need to talk to you about something. Sure, what's up? I asked, curiosity piqued. It's about Sarah. I saw her with James last night, he said, and I felt my heart drop. What do you mean? I replied, feeling a surge of anger rising within me. They're still seeing each other. Yeah, they were at that new bar downtown looking cozy, he said, concern evident in his voice. I wanted to tell you because you deserve to know. I didn't want you to find out from someone else. I felt a whirlwind of emotions flood over me, anger, betrayal, and a sense of disbelief. How could she do this again? I muttered, pacing my apartment. I thought she was trying to change. I'm sorry, man, Mike said gently. You deserve better, just remember that. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm within me. I had worked so hard to move on, and now it felt like the rug had been pulled out from under me once again. But I couldn't let this define me. I wouldn't give Sarah the satisfaction of seeing me crumble. After hanging up with Mike, I felt an unexpected sense of clarity. I had already taken the first steps toward my own happiness, and I couldn't let Sarah's actions derail that progress. I realized I needed to confront her one last time, not out of anger but from a place of empowerment. I was ready to stand my ground and further solidify my decision to cut ties. I decided I wouldn't confront her right away. I needed time to process the new information and gather my thoughts. I took the following days to reflect on what had happened, journaling my feelings and determining how I wanted to approach the situation. I wanted to be calm, collected, and firm in my resolve. It was time to put closure on this chapter for good. I wouldn't let Sarah's betrayal pull me back into the cycle of pain I had just begun to escape. Instead, I would rise above it, stronger than before. I had already embraced my new life, filled with friends, passions, and burgeoning joy. I wouldn't allow the ghosts of past relationships to tarnish my future any longer. A few days later, I decided it was time to confront Sarah. I wanted to address what Mike had seen and assert my boundaries once and for all. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I had come too far to let her back into my life without holding her accountable for her actions. I arranged to meet her at a nearby park, a neutral ground that felt less intimidating than a coffee shop. As I waited for her to arrive, I took a moment to soak in the surroundings. The park was bustling with life, children laughing, couples strolling hand in hand, and friends gathering for picnics. I felt a sense of peace wash over me, a reminder that life continued to move forward, regardless of personal turmoil. I wasn't going to let Sarah's choices hold me. Back, when she finally arrived, I could see the apprehension on her face. She approached slowly, her expression cautious. "Hey," she said softly, taking a seat on the bench across from me. "Hey," I replied, wanting to jump straight to the point. "I heard from Mike that you were seen with James again." Her eyes widened, and I could see the color drain from her face. She started, but I cut her off. "Let me finish," I said, trying to maintain my composure. "I thought you were serious about wanting to change. I genuinely believed you when you said you wanted to work on yourself, but now I find out that you're sneaking around with him again." She looked down, her shoulders slumping in defeat. "It meant nothing, I swear," she tried to protest, her voice trembling. "Then why are you still making these choices?" I pressed, my voice low but firm. "This isn't just about you anymore. You're dragging me back into a mess I've spent weeks trying to escape. I can't do this, Sarah. I won't be part of this cycle anymore." Tears filled her eyes again, but I steeled myself against the emotional pull. "I wanted to believe you could change. I wanted to believe we could find a way to make this work, but you're putting your own needs ahead of everything. I deserve better than this." "I know I messed up," she said, her voice breaking. "But I was confused. I thought maybe I could handle seeing him. It felt like a way to cope." "That's just an excuse," I replied, shaking my head. "You're using your confusion as a crutch instead of taking responsibility for your actions. This isn't about coping, this is about choices, and you're making the wrong ones." For a moment, silence hung between us, heavy with the weight of our past. I could see her grappling with shame and regret, but I also felt a sense of finality in my heart. I wouldn't allow myself to be manipulated again. "I need to move on, Sarah," I said finally, my voice steady. "I can't keep waiting around for you to figure your life out at my expense. I've been rebuilding my life, and I'm not willing to let you tear it down again." Her expression shifted, and I could see the realization set in. "You're really going to walk away, aren't you?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Yes," I confirmed, my heart racing but resolute. "This is it for me. I deserve peace and happiness, and I can't find that with you in my life anymore." The tears streamed down her face as she nodded, understanding the finality of my words. It was hard to watch, but I knew this was for both of us. I needed to stand firm in my choice, and so did she. As I stood up, a sense of liberation washed over me. I had finally closed the door on that chapter of my life, and I felt lighter than I had in weeks. I turned to walk away, but before I left, I glanced back at Sarah one last time. "I hope you find your way, but it won't be with me," I said softly, my voice carrying a note of finality. Walking away felt surreal, like stepping out of a fog that had enveloped me for far too long. I had made a choice to prioritize my own happiness, and it was exhilarating. I felt a sense of empowerment blossoming within me, each step forward a testament to my growth. In the weeks that followed, I continued to embrace my journey. I deepened my friendships, fostered my passion for cooking, and even considered starting a blog to share my culinary adventures. My life was no longer defined by someone else's choices. It was my own to shape. As I stood in my kitchen one evening, preparing a meal for friends, I paused to reflect on how far I had come. The pain of betrayal had taught me valuable lessons about love, trust, and the importance of self-worth. I could finally see a future filled with possibility, unshackled from the weight of the past. I was reclaiming my narrative, one meal and one memory at a time. I had learned that healing was not linear, but with each day, I felt stronger and more equipped to face whatever life threw my way. I was ready for new adventures, new relationships, and a new chapter filled with joy and purpose. The journey wasn't over, but I was no longer afraid. I was ready to embrace life, to welcome love in whatever form it took, and most importantly, to cherish the person I was becoming. I realized that sometimes the hardest decisions lead to the brightest futures, and I was determined to make mine shine.